So last time we finished up talking about how the two pillars of shared language and shared values actually rely upon each other to keep that society up, and that they lead to our shared understanding of meaning in the West in general. And in the United States in particular, due to our multilingual culture, our shared meaning stands firmly on the foundation of the Bible. The Bible, its stories and histories, and the way it shaped Western literature and culture is central, not just to the pillar of shared language, but to that pillar of shared values, which in every other culture is shared religion. Anyway, that is where we are going very briefly with chapter 10, Christianity and the second pillar. There are those who are attempting to undermine the foundational fundamental text by confusing perception of language, but also by going after Christianity, the source of shared language and shared values, directly. They're going after Christianity directly as well as after the language. Ironically, by attacking Christianity, they are also chipping away at the shared values that actually serve to convince Americans that the tares they are sowing are the nutritious wheat Americans are familiar with. Now, you can go back to chapter 7 or episode 26 to get a better understanding of this analogy and what I'm saying here, but I refer to this over and over in this short chapter. It is from the Judeo-Christian tradition that we understand compassion for the poor and oppressed and what justice looks like. And politicians and the media play on the heartstrings of the American people to justify immoral actions as moral ones. From advocating for open borders as compassionate, even though more damage than good is accomplished, as discussed earlier in chapter 8, or equating government redistribution programs to charity, or describing government spending as the Christian thing to do, even though doing so provides Americans a justification for abdicating their moral responsibility to care for the hungry, the poor, the sick, the widow, the orphan, and those in prison. The wheat has been overrun by the tares when Americans believe that because they pay taxes and the government will take care of all those people, they no longer have a personal moral responsibility to those in need. I think I could outline an entire sermon here calling out the so-called Christians who have abdicated their responsibility by calling for the intervention by government instead of taking on that responsibility themselves. But it goes deeper than that, because those who say government should not be helping are now the ones labeled as the haters, the cruel people. Because government helping out the needy, the poor, the sick, the orphan, the widow is equated with the Christian way. And if you disagree with the government doing the helping, well, then you just cannot be a Christian, because it is the Christian thing to do to help. Your moral responsibility ends with apparently agreeing that the government should be doing it instead of you, instead of your family, instead of the church, instead of charities. Or at least your personal moral responsibility ends with someone should be taking care of these people based on what the government says they need. It's not up to you, it's up to the government. That's where your personal moral responsibility ends now. Anyway, I could go completely off the rails, so let me get back on the rails. Because it is not just how we see the needy and the downtrodden, but the oppressed, and what that word even means. The wheat is tares, and the tares are now wheat. Whereas biblical justice is based upon truth and to be tempered with love and mercy, the justice sought for today, though touted as moral, is rooted in revenge, anger, and violence. Moral equality, the basis for legal and political equality, finds its place in Scripture when we understand we are equal in our sin, according to Romans 3:23, but also equal in our salvation, Galatians 3:26. Every single human being is imbued with innate value, being made in the image of God, Genesis 1:26. Yet instead of recognizing or celebrating the person God created, We are called to recognize and celebrate one's hatred of oneself. We have been asked, because the wheat has been replaced by tares, we have been asked to hate someone as much as they hate themselves, because if we don't, then we are being cruel. If we refuse to hate someone as much as they hate themselves, we can't possibly love them. Yes, that is where we find ourselves today. And I'm sure many of us are like, please make it make sense. And yet, there are also way too many Americans who cannot see this paradox our society has created. As a society, we can no longer distinguish the wheat and the tares, to the point that, yes, when we try to uproot the tares, we destroy the wheat as well. We have also so confused the language and have abolished so many traditions and have societally rejected everything that made American society incredible and desirable, that those tares look so much like wheat, we start treating the tares as wheat. We are feeding ourselves tares and wondering why the bread tastes wrong. The next move is to completely demolish Christianity and burn the field. The wheat is bad. Our society has decided the field needs to be burned to the ground. I wrote this hoping that the analogy would be enough. We are poisoning ourselves and calling for the destruction of the actual wheat, what was good and nutritious, when the wheat is not what is poisonous, but what we have replaced it with, what we let sneak in and take over the field. That is what is poisoning us. But we keep blaming the wheat. We are feeding ourselves tares and wondering why the bread tastes wrong. The next move is to completely demolish Christianity and burn the field. Our society has decided the field needs to be burned to the ground. Christianity, the foundation of our shared meaning, is the field, and it has produced the poison. And the argument that seems to make sense is then that Christianity is the problem. And the soil of the field is, of course, the Bible. Because the Bible is not only our shared understanding of meaning, it is the embodiment of our entire culture. Not just language and literature, the Bible has influenced the arts, paintings and sculpture and music, even architecture. None of the great works would have been created without Christianity. Even those who rejected Christianity produced works with themes that would not have existed without the shared understanding found within and because of Christianity. Goethe's Faust, for example, also the great skeptics and atheists we know, like Voltaire and Nietzsche, are inconceivable without Christianity. Indeed, any works intending to undermine Christianity are themselves only created because of the existence of Christianity. Now, we are going to get into why Christianity must be destroyed in order to completely shred the fabric of this country, but it's going to take a few steps of a logical argument, starting with a few premises, and I hope the reader will be able to follow. Religious identity has always been interwoven with one's identity with their tribe or community or society. You could not be a good Kalenjin and not worship the Kalenjin gods. You could not be a good Greek and not worship the Greek gods. In fact, Socrates' greatest crime was corrupting the youth by questioning everything, but most importantly, the Greek gods. You couldn't be a good Roman if you did not exalt the Roman deities. There are reasons atheists attack only Christianity. The God of the Old Testament, the first real monotheistic religion, was that of the Jewish people. But the God of the Old Testament was still a tribal God who related to his chosen people. The enemies of Israel became God's enemies, for example. But Jewish monotheism was not a threat to Roman paganism. Romans were not expected to follow the Jewish God. The Romans simply integrated the Jews' God into their pantheon. Judaism was a legal religion in the Roman Empire. Christianity, however, claims a universal God, a God more powerful, who has dominion over every people in every place at every time. Christianity also proclaims a God who is over all other spiritual beings. Although the attempt to incorporate it into a sort of universalism, true Christianity claims superiority over all other gods, over all faith practices, and over all creation. Because of this, it cannot be integrated into a pantheistic idea of spirituality. And because of this, Christianity demands an objective measuring stick. If someone is going to make a claim that there is an only way or a superior way or a best way, that means truth cannot be relative. That means there must be a good, a better, and a best. And that means there has to be an immutable standard against which to measure. There cannot be my truth and your truth. There can only be truth. This is the bold claim that Christianity makes that those who reject Christianity have the hardest time with. No one wants to be told they are wrong. The new definition of tolerance includes never having to admit you are wrong and necessitates acknowledging that everyone's position, everyone's beliefs, or everyone's opinion comes from a valid place. No matter how ridiculous that place may seem to you, it is completely irrational to the other person. So it is equally valid, because that is where we find ourselves today. Christianity is hateful. Christianity is toxic because Christianity alone demands an objective measuring stick.